What's up, everyone? Today is the summer solstice here in the northern hemisphere, and I'm going to celebrate by doing some of the final decandling of Japanese black pines that I have left. All right, well, this is an older Japanese black pine that came from a auction here in the San Francisco Bay Area a few years ago, and it's gotten pretty healthy, but it still has a long way to go in terms of the overall look and structure. Regardless of that, there are regular maintenance tasks that need to happen in order for the growth to be at the scale that I want it to be for the final composition. And in the middle of summer, basically what that is decandling. So you might notice that this branch is quite a bit bigger than some of the others, and that's because this wasn't decandled last year and perhaps the year before. Part of the reason for that is that when you decandle things, they stay relatively small and they also don't create a lot of wood. And because this was an old tree that was relatively weak for a long period of time, I wanted to allow this to grow in order to basically create more wood in this upper trunk section in preparation for bending it forward, because you guys are looking pretty much at the front of the tree. All right, and now with the basic decandling done, what I've basically done is gone through and removed all of the spring growth from this year and cut back to the same set of needles that were left over from last summer. Now, that's a basic decandling, but what I want to do also while I'm looking at the tree is just do a little bit of analysis and tweaking to move it closer to maybe what I want it to be. So, because this side is much more interesting, it's not common to have deadwood on black pines, but it is an interesting old piece of deadwood. And so bringing the crown forward this direction in order to finish the tree in such a way that it highlights this deadwood is kind of the goal here. I've left this because I left myself a reminder not to cut it, and now I can't remember why, but I'm going to leave it just in case I remember later. Before I do any structural work, I'm going to go through here and pull off a few of last year's needles to just sort of thin it down. That helps to kind of let more light in and convince the tree that it needs to make another good set of needles this year. So as I'm working on this, I'm not really counting the pairs of needles, but it is a good technique for keeping track of relative density. The tree's not so dense that I really need to be super concerned about light penetration, but it is a good idea to evenly thin out to the greatest extent possible all of the foliage, erring on the side of leaving a little bit more needle density on the lower branching and a little bit less needle density on the upper branching. That's to counteract the natural tendency of the tree to grow more strongly from the top than from the bottom. I'm also pulling off some of the small buds that you might see here, and that's because we don't actually want all of the buds that are on the tree. We just want a good set of buds in the right places. And if you leave every bud on the tree, then there is sort of a messy factor to it that also saps some of the light and creates sort of weak growth that is there for year after year. Whereas if you remove that weak growth, then you have a more uniform set of needles and buds. All right, so that finishes this and leaves just the top. All right, with the decandling done and the needles pulled, I can turn my attention to the structure and style of the tree. Post decandling is actually one of the best times to do wiring because there's almost no foliage. So I've left this sacrifice branch for now. I might end up cutting it off, but I think that it's really going to contribute to being able to bend this upper section of the trunk more easily and have there be less chance of splitting, or at least less chance of the splitting causing any major health problems, because what this is doing is it's laying down new layers of wood much faster than the decandled growth would by itself. And so those layers of wood that it's created over the last couple of years are what is going to be responsible for that sort of more bendable, cohesive tissue that is now in that part of the tree. Okay, so you can see that I've got a big wire going from where the deadwood splits off from what is now the main trunk. And that's going to sort of reinforce this. It'll also allow me to bend it a little bit kind of down here so that I can move this deadwood and live wood a little bit closer together. But I'm going to have to use a guy wire and go ahead and pull these together because I don't expect to get much of a bend in this section up here. All right, I think I'm going to leave it there in terms of the guide wire for this session. Maybe come back and bend it a little bit more. I'll just go ahead and put a couple wires up here. All right, and with that, I think that I am done for this session. So a standard decandling with some needle thinning and a little bit of bending. I didn't really go crazy on this thing, but got it closer to the composition that I'm hoping that it will end up being. So a step in the right direction. That wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.